Hey there, lovely people. Welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. This week I am excited to say that we are talking about They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I have to say, I absolutely love this book. And normally when I write out my thoughts after I finish a book, it's about like one single side of a notebook page. And this one was five pages of just writing about all of the thoughts I had. As soon as I finished it, I told all of my friends who read and my mom that they needed to read this book. And I just really enjoyed it. It was like a wild ride the whole way through. And I read the acknowledgements page. Adam said that his editor described it as a dark game of Jenga. And I've never loved anything more than that phrase ever, because of how perfectly it fits exactly what happened in the story. It's the best description possible for this book, because there's all of these moving pieces and they just keep going and you know that it's gonna fall at some point, and it's perfect. Let's talk about my thoughts a little bit more specifically. I loved the characters' voices. I thought that Rufus and Mateo were so vastly different, and their compliments to each other were really well thought out, and their way of impacting each other due to their complete oppositeness was really beautiful. I absolutely adored the fact that we had those third-person sections in the book where characters who are not Mateo or Rufus get their say, but in the third person perspective rather than the first person perspective that we interact with Mateo and Rufus in. I thought that those really added to the magic of the story, because you're watching these two 17, almost 18 and 18-year-old boys go through their last day together, and their day, the way that they live their life for that day, impacts the people around them, and you get to see those impacts. And I absolutely loved that those moments were in there. Even though at the beginning, the first one, I was like, who? What? Okay. But it was like a short page, so you could get used to the idea. And then you started to get longer moments in these other characters' lives, and you don't care anymore. Like, you're cool with it. And it's just moving those Jenga pieces into a new position. It's just so magical of a way of telling a story about dying. Just like being able to see the impact that these characters that you know are going to die have on the people around them, and the impacts that the people around them have on them as well. So because I loved this book so much, I went ahead and I read some of the negative reviews just to be able to have a little bit more to say in this video, that I could genuinely give something that we can all learn from, and maybe some more things that could be improved in the story, because I was focusing a little bit too much on how much fun I was having in the story while I was reading it. So I wanted to take a look at those other perspectives, see what people who rated it like 2 and 3 stars would say about it, things that they thought could be improved, and what I may or may not agree with. And I did actually find a few things that people who were rating it 2 stars were saying, and I agreed with a few of them. And then there was one that I strongly disagree with, because I feel so confidently that their opinion is wrong, even though I know it's subjective. Anyway, so we'll start with the ones that I agreed with, and we'll talk about like those improvements, and then I'll start my argument for the other one. One of the reviews that I saw that I did kind of agree with was that they thought the book was going to emotionally wreck them, because it's called They Both Die at the End. People are raving about it on the internet. It's the kind of thing that you expect to go on an emotional journey through, and it doesn't really have that kind of emotional turmoil that you would expect coming from the perspective of the world that we are in right now, because the world that we are in right now is very different from the world that the characters are in. So our perspective of how our emotions should be played with is very different from how they end up actually getting played with. So it's like the focus of the book isn't necessarily on the fact that they both die at the end. It's more on the fact that they are living right now, which is fine. It's a carpe diem story, and they are seizing the day. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what you expect when you're coming into it. And if you're expecting to be like emotionally destroyed and absolutely sobbing at the end of this book, I wasn't. The person who wrote this review wasn't. I enjoyed reading the book. It gave me a lot of dopamine, and that's not what I expected from it, which in my opinion is not a problem. But if you're going for something that's gonna make you want to cry, this isn't it. So I can see how that experience could cause a little bit of disappointment from readers. I also think that the world because of it having death cast as an option, it doesn't have the emotional response to dying that we do out in the world. Because if somebody came up to you and was like, hey, you're gonna die at some point today, I don't know how and I don't know when, but you're gonna die today, what would you do with that? How would you handle that? We don't have any systems in place for that. But in this world where death cast is a fixture in their world, they have all kinds of things set up. You can do pretty much anything on the day that you're gonna die before you die because of the world. It's very different from ours. So people experience knowing that they're going to die differently than how we would experience knowing that we're going to die or knowing that a loved one is going to die because of how their world works. And I feel like there was a lot of room for emotional depth there, especially on Rufus's side. I felt like he was a little stunted in the emotional response to the fact that he was going to die for a majority of the book. And even the couple of times that he's like, oh my God, I'm not ready to die. It's there and then it's gone. I understand why, because he's a tough guy character. He's very like macho in his presentation of himself. How we meet him in his first scene, he's beating somebody up and we don't know why or who, but that's the presentation that we get right off the bat. So you're not really going to be able to look at him as a emotionally confident character, because that's Mateo's strong suit and that's where he pulls that out on Rufus. But I just felt like there was a lot of like flimsy emotion towards the fact that they're dying and singular feelings, not very like multifaceted feelings towards it. Like Mateo is scared of it. So scared. He doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to die. He doesn't understand why he's gonna die. He's got to do stuff before he dies because he's so scared and he doesn't want to leave his house. Like Mateo's scared. That we get that. And then Rufus, I don't know. He seems so put together about it the whole time. It rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, and it rubbed some other people the wrong way. I think it has to do with Rufus's backstory and the world building that led to him feeling the way that he does. And it's hard to empathize with that because of how different their world is from ours. So I found that a little bit jarring. Now, for the thing that I strongly disagree with, I saw a chain of review, comment, where somebody said in their review that Rufus does not have a believable voice. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that totally makes sense. I totally agree. He doesn't sound like a real person at all. Nobody talks like that. And then they were making fun of him and the way that he talks in those comments. And I looked at every single person who had a profile picture. Now I understand that YA, 50% of YA readers are adults, case in point. But everyone on this chain was in like their 30s, if I'm being generous, and like mother age. And they were all women too, which is probably like there's a lot of women reviewers on Goodreads. So that's not really a demographic thing, but this one chain, it matters. So I'm very defensive of this because I have spoken to an almost 18-year-old tough guy type, and many of them around the years 2016 to 2019, a lot of them in that era, and they all have their weird catchphrase, the thing that they say all the time. And it doesn't have any meaning anymore. It doesn't, because they say it so often. It's in every other sentence. They all do it. I promise. I promise. Go talk to an 18-year-old boy who thinks he's tougher than you. Do it. They talk like this. So Rufus using mad in every other sentence, like, that's mad crazy. Yeah, we were mad tight. It's so realistic. It's so beyond realistic that I was like, wow, I can see this kid in my mind because I know exactly who would be talking like this. And that is an argument I am happy to have because I feel very, very strongly about it. Like in my review that I write for myself and myself alone, I literally wrote on the page, I would die on this hill, parentheses figuratively, end parentheses, because Rufus's narration are so good for his character. And you see that he uses mad as a defensive mechanism when he's starting to get emotional. He starts saying things are mad this means they're mad that, and it's like a nervous tick. It's a nervous tick, and it's so good. It's so good. And I am so... People who confidently say that people don't talk like that when they've never talked to somebody from that demographic, age group, area in the world, that kind of stuff made me so upset, because if you don't have the firsthand experience to say people don't talk like that, then how are you gonna say so confident that people don't talk like that? You don't know. You've just never talked to them. Your experience is not universal. Anyways, to change the topic a little bit and stop arguing with people on the internet who will likely never see this video, I'm gonna start talking about the things that we can learn from this book. And I don't want to dig too deep into it because it's got a really unique way of building in, I don't want to say magic, but like something like magic into a real world situation, and then using that to propel the story. And then it's obviously got really, really fantastic character development and distinction and just story crafting all together. Those are really broad things that you can learn from a lot of different books. But one takeaway that I think that this book has that I haven't seen before is that you don't have to exclusively pay attention to your main characters and your main character's perspective. You can look at anybody in the world, as long as you do it in a way that makes sense to the reader and isn't super jarring. Like, you introduce your main characters, we get acquainted with your main characters, we get acquainted with some of their side characters, and then you start talking from one of the side characters' perspectives for a chapter, for a page, the way that he does in this book, and then take it from there. You can do whatever you want. You can tell your main character's story from the people around them's perspective, which I don't think has ever been done before. Like, not telling, like, your main character is person A, but person Z saw them do this thing, and then person J saw them do this thing, and they all tell their story, their perspective of them going through their day and encountering person A. Person A has always been your main character, and person A is the one that we're keeping up with. That's a possibility that I would never have thought of if I had not read this book and seen the way that Adam decided to use side characters that barely interacted with his main characters to show their impact on the world around them. This beautiful butterfly effect of these characters causing all of these other situations and stopping other situations and being touched by other situations. And I really want to give spoilers, but I also want so many more people to read this book, so I'm trying really hard to keep them in. I feel like taking the time to play with other perspectives, how do other people perceive your main character or characters, is a really interesting technique to play with or even use as your main process. The fact that he's able to create this experience of us waiting over and over and over to find out what this one little snippet was, what that relates to, and makes you pay attention to the people that you interact with through the main character's perspectives to see who's going to come back and how they interact with them later on and what connections they have in general, and knowing that everything in this small little world is connected. And that's so much fun. It's like a Dark Game of Jenga. I love it. It was so much fun. It's the kind of book that you desperately wish you could be able to read for the first time again. Watching all of the pieces come together and then fall. You just find yourself hoping that the title is wrong because you've fallen in love with the story and the characters and their growth and all of that. That's what I would take away from this book, is to play around with other people, see where that takes you. It might make the most interesting story you've ever written. It might make a pile of confusing mess, but it would definitely be fun to play with for sure. So that's all I've got to say on They Both Die at the End. I thoroughly recommend you go read it. I want everyone to read it. If you've read it, talk to me in the comments. Tell me whatever your first thought is when you think about this book. Let's have a chat. I want to talk to you about this so much. If you haven't read it, go read it and then come back and tell me that I'm the reason that you read it, because that would make me feel really special. And let's have a book chat in the comments. I love that. This is just, I really enjoyed this book. I think this is my favorite book. Right now, this is my favorite book, for sure. I will see you on Tuesday for a Writing Tip Tuesday video, and then I will see you back again on Saturday for another Story Study Saturday.